of your own. I made a mistake. This could be it, sweetheart.
I take it back.
Hello and welcome back to episode 8 of Unlimited Limited, the show where we talk about Star Wars Unlimited's draft and sealed formats. So, the first video on this channel and the first episode of Unlimited Limited was a set review, focused on draft and primarily pre-release for the Jump to Lightspeed set. And in that 4-hour and change video, I talked about every card in Jump to Lightspeed, and I gave each card a grade from A to F, where A is, this is an insane bomb, you have to take it, down to B, which is, this is a very strong card, and it will probably increase your chance of winning the game when you end up playing it. A C is just, this card is okay, it's your deck's going to be mostly Cs, it makes up the bread and butter of any deck. D is, it's playable, but reluctant. You try your best to not have many Ds. You'll usually have a couple. And then Fs, which is really do not play this card. So I went through and I gave every card a rating, but of course these ratings were given before I actually played with the cards. So there's bound to be some errors, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, there's a lot of cards in Jump to Lightspeed, and I definitely did not get all of them right, for sure. But this video is going to be focused on the cards that I got at least 2 grades off. So for example, if I gave something a C- and it's actually a C+, I'll talk about that in this video. But if I gave something a B and it's actually a B-, I probably won't talk about that in this video. It's close enough. So if you've drafted Jump to Lightspeed, you probably know that pilot leaders were a lot stronger than most people, myself included, were thinking they would be. In fact, they pretty much dominate any draft metagame. If you go to a draft and you play it out, there's a very, very high chance that the person who went 3-0 or 4-0 or whatever was playing a pilot leader. And of course, that's because there's a lot of pilot leaders in the format, but it's also just because they tend to be stronger. In draft, flipping a leader onto a unit and making it a really big, basically unkillable unit, because none of the hard removal in this format would kill the leaders. Flipping your leader onto a space unit or ground unit and making it basically a 10-10 unkillable monstrosity would pretty much win you the game right there, or in the next couple of turns. So that ended up being very strong. So a lot of what I talked about in the leader section is going to be influenced by that. And also a lot of what I talk about in the non-leader section as well is also going to be influenced by that. A card that can have a good impact on whether your opponent is actually able to flip their leader on curve is going to be a lot stronger than previously thought. Without more yapping, let's get into it. First card I want to talk about is Grand Admiral Thrawn. So Grand Admiral Thrawn is a leader that everyone is really excited about for Constructed mainly, and in Constructed he is really cool. I don't think at the time of making this video he's super meta, but there's a lot of cool B tier decks that run him. He's very, very fun to play. And he's very fun to try to brew a deck for, right? You put in all the one-defeated abilities you can, and then you systematically cut a few of them that you realize aren't working, and it's a very fun deck to brew. I highly recommend giving it a try if you haven't yet. But in draft, he just isn't quite as strong as I was hoping. The 4/7 stat line on a 6 flip is pretty good, and his ability, again, in a vacuum seems really strong. There are a lot of one-defeated units in this format, and you'll probably get a few, especially if you take Thrawn as your leader and you're prioritizing them. That will be something that you'll get a decent amount of. You will get a decent amount of value out of Thrawn, but again, the fact that he doesn't pilot is a really big downside. One other thing that kind of made Thrawn suffer a tiny bit is a lot of the when defeated units in this format were actually just good cards. For example, Fleet Interdictor was really good in draft, Landing Shuttle's pretty good, CR-90 Relief Runner is good, First Order Stormtrooper is good. A lot of the units that you would get value out of from when defeated, TIE Ambush Squadron of course, they're just good units. So getting them as abundantly as you would want them in a Thrawn deck was really difficult because other players were just taking them for their non-Thrawn decks because they're just good units. There are a couple of units that, you really do want to be in Thrawn for, but really you were fighting people that weren't even in this archetype for your units, so that also made him a little bit tougher. That being said, I don't think he's bad. I think that he's strong and he'll get you value, and it's a pretty strong flip, so I'm just going to call him a straight up C here instead of a B-, which is what I originally gave him. Next we have Lando. Lando is the only leader, I believe, in this format that flips on 7. And I originally gave him a C-, but I would like to give him a C+. And the reason for that, I'm not going to spend as much time talking about Lando as I was about Thrawn, but pilot leaders, again, are just so good. Now, the reason that Lando kind of, I think, caps out at C+ is because he flips on 7. By the time you're flipping Lando, your opponent has gotten probably at least one turn with their leader piloted out, sometimes more, and that's going to very quickly get them just a ton of value, and you're sort of stuck for an extra turn before Lando can come out. So a line that I've had happen pretty often is, let's say I'm playing Luke, who's a leader that flips on 6. I flip my leader, I attack, I kill one of their space units, then I use his ability, Luke's ability, which is deal 4 or 3 to another unit if it's a fighter, which it always will be whenever you're attaching Luke. Not always, often will be. And so you can pretty much 2 for 1 there. That gets rid of their 2 vehicles, and then maybe you throw one of your other units at a third vehicle if they have it, and then what are they going to do, right? They flip Lando as a 5/7 Sentinel? Like, probably not, because you have this huge Luke unit that's going to just close the game out. And that's always not always going to happen, of course. That is kind of the dream scenario for the Luke player, but scenarios that are like a little bit less value heavy than that, but like still pretty devastating for the Lando player will happen pretty often. That all being said, if the Lando player can stabilize and still have a flip unit or a good unit to flip onto whenever Lando flips, it's of course very, very strong. Giving a shield token to usually a ground unit, that's okay. But yeah, just 5/5 Sentinel means that it's going to slow the game right down, and you're probably going to be swinging for like 9 or 10 damage with whatever unit this is attached to, and you don't even need to worry about taking out your opponent's units with this flip unit. You can just go right to base because they have to hit Lando. Good. I want to talk about Darth Vader, who I gave a C +2, but I think is a B. It turns out, so the reason I gave it a C+ is I was like, yeah, okay, this is, strong. It generates you units, and any incremental unit advantage that you can get in draft is good, right? You'll get a bunch of 1/1s. The 1/1s aren't going to be that strong, but, they'll give you little chip value here and there, and that's true, for sure. But again, the fact that he is a pilot that gives something +5/+5, which is a lot. I think this is the biggest pilot that flips on 6. Don't quote me on that. +5/+5 is a lot. And it is, of course, yeah, you get the 2 TIE fighters, but honestly, at that point, what you care about is having a massive unkillable Hulk that comes out basically at the same time as most of the other leaders in the set. And it will usually just close games out. And then, yeah, of course, the extra 1/1s definitely will get you value as well, but really what you're playing this for is just the big flip. And again, it's just so devastating. So I've upped that from a C+ to a B for the same reason. I know this is analysis is getting a little bit boring because it's just me saying, oh yeah, this unit is a pilot and pilots are good, so I'm increasing its rating. But yeah, I felt like I need to really tell you how wrong I was about pilots. I thought they were going to be pretty good, not exceptional, but they were exceptional. Again, same idea. Rio Durant, I gave a C+. It's probably a B-. This is only like this is a kind of increment that I said I wasn't going to talk about, C+ to B-. But for Rio in particular, I figured I would just give him a shout out because he kind of represents the class of pilot leaders that flip on 5, which is a very strong asset. I did a draft probably a month ago where I was playing the Luke as a leader and my opponent was playing Rio. And he ended up closing the game out and winning, and it was just purely because Rio flipped a turn earlier, and that will happen pretty often. I was like, as the game was going on, I was like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, I'm at a real disadvantage here by flipping a turn later. So, again, because Rio's a pilot and because he flips pretty early, I think there's 2 leaders in the set that flip on 4, but, most of them flip on 6, I think. So, I think Rio goes up to a B-, maybe a little higher, maybe a B depending on, I guess, what other leaders people have drafted, but the transport synergy doesn't come up a ton, and, I think that B- is an okay place for him. But I could be wrong about that. Maybe he should be a B. Cool. Oh, sorry, one more unit, and this is the saddest one for me, is Admiral Piet. I gave him a C+ because I really wanted the capital ship dream to work. And in Constructed, Piet is awesome. In a vacuum, Piet is probably one of the, if not the strongest leaders in the game. Him and Han 1 are both up there in my opinion. But of course, that I'm not saying that Piet is like tier 1 in Constructed. He's probably not. But nevertheless, his ability is really, really strong. He flips on 5. The 2/7 unit, though, and it can't be a pilot, is really tough. Turns out, a 2/7 on the ground, when jump to Lightspeed happens with 10/10 units in Space Arena, doesn't really do much for you. And sure, you'll get a cheap capital ship unit every now and then, but it's really not often enough to justify this. So very sad about this Admiral Piet downgrade. Honestly, D plus might even be too high. You probably, unless you really get there on capital ships, should not be trying this in draft. If you do really get there on capital ships, again, give it a go. That might be cope, but I'm sad about this demotion, unfortunately. Cool. Next up, we have space units. So now I can stop just saying, oh, it's a better leader because it has a pilot ability. Oh, it's a worse leader because it doesn't. So I'm going to start out with the Swarming Vulture Droid, which I gave a D plus to. And my reason for that, I remember when I was doing this analysis, I was really high on 2-cost space units and 2-cost ground units, as always. And as you should be in draft. They're really, really good. It's super important to have a turn 1 play. You can run away with the game pretty easily if you do and your opponent does not. But still, I was like, yeah, but Swarming Vulture Droid, it's basically always going to be a 2/2 for 2, and that's really just not good enough. There's so many 2/3s for 2. There's so much better you can do with 2 resources, and that is definitely correct. There is a lot better you can do, but I think that there's a lot worse you can do too. My reason for this is actually kind of a meta call, in that every time I've drafted so far, people kind of look at this unit and they think it's a joke, because it kind of is. But then because of that, no one takes it. And one guy in particular starts to realize, wait, nobody's taking this. And to be fair, that guy has never been me. I've never done that. Although maybe I should have a couple of times. But so one person starts to take them, and they get like 4 or 5 of these pretty consistently. Because if I remember correctly, and I might be wrong about this, fact check me, but I think I read somewhere that this unit shows up twice as often as other commons. So you'll see a lot of these going around. And it's not unreasonable to think that you could get 4 or even 5 of them. And at that point, maybe it is worth it. Again, it's just kind of a meta call. I think if people ever actually realize this card is good, it'll immediately go back down to being like a D. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. Because I've had games where my opponent plays this on turn 1, and I play a 2-drop. And then on turn 2, I ignore their Swarming Vulture Droid to do something else, because why would I care about it? And they play another one. And I'm like, oh, okay. So now you have 2 3/2s. And then I still ignore it because I'm like, that was funny. That was like a lucky draw you had where you got both of your Swarming Vulture Droids. And then they play a third one. And now they have 3 4/2s. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I actually need to deal with these. And I've had that happen, I think, twice now. And every time it does, I'm like, oh, I feel silly. Like I should have, this guy has the Swarming Vulture Droid thing going on. And I should have dealt with that. But again, I think that worked because I was unprepared that strategy would work. So now that I'm aware of it, it sort of maybe gets a little bit worse because now maybe when they play this on 1, I'm like, okay, maybe I take a tiny value hit by killing it instead of, I don't know, going into their base or doing something else with my 2/3 unit. And then, of course, that makes their game plan a lot worse because then they play a second one and now it is just another 2-cost 2/2. So I think, and then of course, if it gets too good, people will just take this too highly, and then it goes back to being bad, and then no one takes it, and then it goes back to being good. It's like the predator-prey graphs that you see. But nevertheless, I think that this card, again, it's probably not great. I don't think you should take it super highly, but I think it would be wrong of me to not say that I was probably a little bit wrong about it being a D+, and it probably is a C, where you just take it sometimes and you're just fine to run it. And again, fail case it being a 2-cost 2/2 in a deck where you need a 2-cost ship, which you, again, super do in this format, is fine. And it's a fighter. There's fighter synergy. There's technically droid and separatist synergy, but a lot less. Yeah, no, it's a fine card, and I think that it's something that you can take and not be super sad about. I want to talk about MC-30 Assault Frigate as well, which I gave a C to, which I think, looking back, I can completely understand why I did that, right? It's a 5-cost 5/5. Great. But it really is an amazing target for your pilot leaders, and that's why I upgraded it. I think if you're playing this deck in a deck that doesn't have a pilot leader, it probably stays at a C. It's probably that. But if you can, it's so well positioned because most of the very strong pilot leaders, in my opinion, flip on 6. And so if you play this out on 5 resources and your opponent doesn't immediately deal with it, and you take initiative, because if you play this on 5 resources, you're probably taking less actions that turn than your opponent, and you have initiative, and they can't kill it immediately, I mean, you just flip your leader onto this, and now you have not just an unkillable Hulk, but one that can effectively deal with your opponent's scarier units while still doing base damage. The Overwhelm is super relevant. The Raid 1, take it or leave it. 6 is kind of a breakpoint sometimes, but it really is something exceptional for sure whenever you have a strong leader on it. It is a capital ship for Piet. Again, I'm still holding out on that cope, but yeah, it's just a strong unit to flip your leader onto. So I was kind of wrong about it, but again, I think that C is probably right if you don't have a strong leader to flip onto it, but B- if you do, which you often will. All right, let's talk about bases. So Lake Country, I gave an F to Lake Country, if you can believe that. Now, oh wait, hold on. The grade for what it's supposed to be is covered up by Lake Country. Let me see if I can fix that. Oh, okay, no, it's still an F, but it's really funny if you can play it. At a draft a few weeks ago, I had someone playing Phasma, I believe, with this, and that was a very funny deck, but they had to play quite a few off-aspect cards, as you could imagine, and really, in draft, sometimes you struggle to get a 2-aspect deck going. Don't limit yourself to try to only do 1 aspect, okay? It's just too difficult. Yeah, don't play this base. But it is very funny if you do, as you can see here, with one from F to funny. So let's talk about ground units now. IG-88, I originally gave a C +2, but I think it's deserving of a B. The main reason for that is it's just kind of scary in every mode. Piloting for 2 is really good. Now, any non-leader pilot is a little bit risky to play, because what will often happen in my experience is you'll have a limited number of, say, space units or just vehicles in general that you can pilot things onto. And of course, leaders can't flip onto units that already have pilots on them. So you put this onto 1, and your opponents have a hard time dealing with it, as you could expect. +3 health is a lot. But they can pretty easily deal with the rest of your vehicles. And now you don't really have anywhere for your leader to pilot on, because your only vehicle that survived has IG-88 on it. But again, there are worse problems to have. I'm just saying that is one downside I've noticed that does come up sometimes. But really, now I'm going to start only singing the praises of this card because it's excellent. An enemy unit is basically always going to be damaged. There's enough tokens between TIE fighters and X-Wings and other random like 2-drop ships or whatever. A unit is always going to be damaged. And so this is going to be a 7/5 for 5, like pretty often. Even when it's not, though, even when it's just a 4/5, going to be pretty incredible. And then, yeah, if you can pilot this onto a unit, like I said, units are pretty much always going to be damaged. It's 2 costs for +3/+3. Which is an incredible rate. You're happy to play either mode. I weirdly usually found myself playing the unit more often than the pilot, which is unusual, but I think that either mode is exceptional, and I think that I'm really happy to first pick a card like this. The one thing that keeps me from first picking it really is the double aspect cost. I still would sometimes, but that would be the only thing that would give me some kind of pause. But yeah, exceptional card, definitely better than C+. I think I'd be happy to give it a B. This is probably my biggest change. I gave Panteron Starship Thief a C, and I think it's actually a B+. I think this card is exceptional. It's probably one of the top 5 strongest cards in the set, actually. Every time I've played it, it's felt great. Every time it's been played against me, it's like won the game for my opponent. It's just such an exceptionally strong card, and I think that you should take it basically all of the time. So it's a 2-cost 2/2, but you're like never playing it like that. You're pretty much always playing it as just a 5-cost I steal your unit. There are a lot of fighters and a lot of transports in this format, and a lot of them are very good, and a lot of them are a important part of your opponent's game plan. Like, if your opponent plays a fighter on 5 and they have Luke as their leader, for example, you know that they're going to try to flip Luke onto that big fighter next turn. You can just steal that. So not only have you removed that unit, which, again, removal, as you know, in draft is exceptional, as we'll talk about in a minute. It's more exceptional this format, but removal is very good. And this is better than that, because it doesn't just take their unit, it gives you a unit. I remember when I rated this as C, I was thinking to myself, I'm probably wrong about this. And the reason why is because in Magic the Gathering, there are every now and then like cards that steal your opponent's cards. There's a famous one a few years ago called Agent of Treachery from core set 19 or 20 or something like that. And that card played very well in draft. It was I think a 7-cost 2/3, and when it entered, you stole one of your opponent's units. And it had other text that didn't matter for draft, really. And I remember back in the day, I was like pretty new to Magic, and I was reading that card, and I was like, this doesn't seem good. Like, 7 mana for a 2/3. And then someone explained it to me like this. They said, okay, you know that like removal is good in draft, right? Now, even though I was new, I was like, yeah, no, I know removal is good in draft. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, you can think of this as removal and also a big unit because you're going to be stealing their unit, right? So you know, you're paying 7 mana, sure, but this 7 mana has murder on it, which is the removal in Magic, and it has a big unit staple to it. And that made me think, oh, shoot, you're right. This actually is really good, right? So it's just kind of the same thing here. And the reason I gave it a C originally is I was like, yeah, well, you know, you're probably going to be trading down on this pretty often. Like, it's going to be unlikely that your opponent's going to play a 5-cost ship and then you spend 5 to take it. But that really doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is exactly what I just said, right? You know, if your opponent plays a 3-cost ship and you steal it, you're not just playing a 3-cost ship. You're also removing their 3-cost ship for a total, like, resource value, I guess, of 6, even though you spent 5. Now, of course, you're going to try to steal the more expensive ships for sure. But yeah, this is just exceptional. Now, of course, this does have the downside of if your opponent can find a way to remove it, they get their unit back. And that sucks if that happens for sure. You feel really bad if that happens. But that won't happen very often because there aren't actually that many cards that deal with upgrades in this set. There's things like Eject, there's things like Insurgent Saboteurs, which is the 6-cost 6/5 on attack, destroy, and upgrade. Like, those cards exist for sure, but there really aren't that many of them, and really only a couple of them are actually good. There's a couple that technically are in the set but nobody plays because they're bad. Maybe someone would sideboard in them against you, but it's very hard to deal with this. Your opponent's probably going to just have to kill the ship, in which case you're super happy because they've just probably traded 2 of their units for 1 of yours, and that's just good value. Anyway, I've gushed about this card enough. You should take it. It's very good. I'm questioning whether it's playable out of Aspect. I don't actually know yet. I'll let you guys know if I figure it out. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you've tested it out of Aspect and how it feels. But I'm not 100% sure, but I'd like to hear your experiences with that. All right, next card I want to talk about is the Kyogre Turn. Now, this one is a little bit spicy. I gave it a D+, but it probably plays closer to a C. But, hear me out, only in decks where you can really get this extra 6 damage out of it. So, for example, I've talked about Luke a lot. I'm going to mention him one more time. In Luke, you put him, for example, on that like 1/3 Y-Wing fighter. You know, that unit will have less than 6 power. And then not only do you get to get into base for an extra whatever damage, but you also get to take out one of your opponent's units with the on-attack trigger. Now, that's specifically in Luke. In other leaders, it's good too. Like if you have Vader, you're going to sometimes be putting Vader on a TIE fighter. Like that's going to happen sometimes. And you can, so that TIE fighter will be a 6/6 and you can ready it and deal an extra 6 to base or whatever. You know, 3 costs to deal an extra 6 to base is really good. For a cause I believe in is 3 costs to deal an extra, usually 4 to base and a little bit of extra deck manipulation. And that sees constructed play. And it doesn't see constructed play for the deck manipulation. It sees it for the 4 damage, right? So if you can spend 3 to do an extra 5 or 6, you know, that's constructed good, right? And we're talking about draft, so it doesn't need to be constructed good to be draft good. Now, of course, that's not always going to happen, and you're going to be resourcing this card sometimes, but it's fine. But I do think that a lot of decks that play a decent amount of fighters, transports, and have a leader that will flip regularly and not make a unit go over 6 power. So again, Vader flipping onto a TIE fighter, Luke flipping onto a cheap fighter. There's a lot of 1 and 2 cost, or there's a lot of 1 and 2 power fighters. And then even someone like Rio, this could be good on because Rio, you're going to want transports, right? This card, it's not bad. Now, again, it's not great. I wouldn't be first picking this card, even if I'm like, oh, I got Luke and Rio and Vader as my 3 leaders. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to take Kyogre turn first. I'm not going to do that, right? It'll come late, and it has good reason to. It's not an amazing card, but I think that D+ is too low, and I think if you can get there with pilot leaders like you usually want to, it goes up to a C. Again, if you don't get there with pilots or pilot leaders, don't play this card. It's probably lower than D+. All right, next we're going to talk about one that I did a YouTube short on, which you can check out if you want. Honestly, these videos you're watching now are 10 times more informative than those, so if you're watching these, don't worry about watching my shorts, but if you're watching my shorts, you should watch these. So Direct Hit, which is a 4-cost event that just says defeat a non-leader vehicle unit. I gave a B- to that, but I actually think it's a B+. I think in most formats, this card would be a B-, but in this format in particular, and again, I'm sorry, but because of the leader units that are pilots, this card is just exceptionally good. Because what will often happen is your opponent will have a 5 or 6 cost leader, or a 5 or 6, or a leader that'll flip on 5 or 6, and, you know, on the 4 resource turn, they'll play out some big ship that they want to flip onto, or maybe on the 5 resource turn if they have a leader that flips on 6, and you just direct hit it. And now now you can hopefully clean up all their smaller units so that they can't flip onto those, or they have to flip onto one of their smaller units, and it's a lot easier to deal with your units or your leader, right? Like this will often, you know, there's a certain symmetry in drafts, especially if you both have pilot leaders that flip on the same turn, because, you know, you play a unit, they play a unit, maybe they trade, maybe you play a unit, maybe they play a unit, then you both flip your leaders, and there's this symmetry, and this is a symmetry breaking card, right? Because, you know, you play a unit, they play a unit, they trade, you play a unit, they play a unit, you play a unit, they play a big unit, and they're like getting ready to flip, and you destroy that. The symmetry is broken. You're now playing a big unit and then flipping your leader, and you're going to win that game almost certainly, right? Of course, it's a common. They'll probably have something like this too if they're in this aspect. But direct hit, and I talked about this in my short, so I'll mention it here, is a card that I actually am willing and even happy to play out of aspect. I'm paying 6 for this card, and I'm happy to do so. I don't know if I've ever passed a direct hit after pick like 4. I'm pretty much always just snagging it up, putting it in my deck, paying 6 for it, and I'm super happy about that. It's a great card, and in this set in particular, I think it's perfectly positioned to be a B+. And now you know my secret of taking it out of aspect. So if you're sitting it down at a draft table with me, then try to forget that I said that, because I want them. All right, and this sort of goes to the same thing that I was talking about a second ago, about removal and breaking symmetry. Now, these I don't think are quite as good as direct hit. I've upgraded them to a B, and I'm talking about them at the same time because they kind of fit in the same idea. They both can deal with smaller space units or finish off a larger space unit. And they don't break symmetry in the same incredibly impactful way that direct hit does, but they do still break symmetry, and they will very often help you secure a win. I think I gave Shoot Down a B- originally, and I think I almost gave it a C+ because it only hits space units. Now, in most sets, that would be a really severe downside, but in this set, it really wasn't. In this set, you pretty much always wanted to target space units anyway, because that's where the vehicles were, and that's where they would be flipping their leader onto. The 2 damage to base is just kind of a nice upside. I never found that was really the breaking point, although in some games it will be. Piercing Shot, there aren't a ton of shield tokens, but when there are, this feels really good. Probably, this is a bit hearsay, but I'm going to say it anyway. Probably about 10-15% of the time, I've like had the shield token thing happen, and it always is like incredible blowout because they've usually spent extra resources in order to give a shield token to a unit, and now that resource is completely nullified. But I think they're both like approximately the same quality card, and of course Piercing Shot can hit ground units too, which comes up sometimes, so that justifies the 1 more cost, and I think they're both Bs. And that takes us to the end of the list. There were other cards, of course, that I was wrong about. Asajj Ventress, for example, I think I was off by like half a grade. And there were lots of others, but I figured that if I wanted to talk about every card I was even half a grade off of, we would be here for, you know, another 4 hours. But I think that those were the ones I was the most wrong about, with the actual award going to Pantern Starship Thief as the card I was most wrong about in the Jump to Lightspeed cycle. So Legends of the Force spoilers are happening right now. And I'm following them. I'm not going to release my grades of those cards until after they're all spoiled, because, you know, if I release a list when half of them are spoiled and then the second half of them come out and, you know, they have massive synergies with some cards in the first half, then I have to change those. So I'm just going to wait until they're all spoiled and I'll do a video. I think I'm going to break it into 4 parts, 1 for each aspect, or maybe 5 parts, 1 for each aspect, and then 1 for like heroes and villainy and neutral all in one video. But if you guys prefer the like 4-hour monolith, then let me know. I'll just do that instead. But that will probably... But yeah, keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for a couple of other cool videos that are in the works. I'm very excited about one that's going to be happening in the middle of June-ish. I'm very excited about that. One other thing I just want to super quickly mention is that, of course, I'm not getting this data from anywhere other than my own experience. When you're looking at like Magic the Gathering's draft stats and grades and stuff, those actually have a little bit more objectivity behind them, because Magic Arena, there's a client called 17 Lands, which is... really amazing. It aggregates a bunch of data from the users who have it installed on their computer, like myself, and it actually makes these like spreadsheets based on, you know, win rates that have actually appeared in games. As far as I know, Star Wars Unlimited doesn't have anything like that right now because there is no official client to aggregate this data from. So again, these are all from my opinions and don't really have any data behind them. So if you have a massive disagreement, then I would actually genuinely love to hear about it because that will probably influence how I play as well. There's probably something to it. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. And as always, may the Force be with you.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?